Welcome, all you Contras partisans and special guests that don't exist, Wisco Mando, Patriot Man, and Rabbit. This is kind of a sad one for me because we just did another podcast together. We were talking about gear, we talked about rifle updates, some optics, and some other stuff. And of course, the software I use is usually fairly good, but for whatever reason, I get Patriot Man on here and it just gets jammed up. I'll probably try to do one. Maybe we'll do a live together on Podbean because that seems to work better for Patriot Man. And we're going to have to organize that one again. For right now, Rabbit's out working his butt off, so I don't expect to see him for another couple weeks. And I'll try to get Wisco and Patriot on at the same time somehow with Magic. I apologize to all you guys that sat there and who recorded for an hour and got butt kiss out of it. So that sucked. But I kind of want to go over a little bit of what we did and what we talked about and go on to some other subjects just because I don't want to ruin it for everybody. Right now, there is a sale going on from, I don't know when it's going to go to, but Brushbeater's got it up on his website. He's closing out the Wolf line of PVS 14s. They're Gen 2 Plus with the white Foss, and they're phenomenally good. They're $1,700 right now. You really can't beat the price, and they look better and cause less eye strain than my Gen 3s. So, granted, my Gen 3s are older, and I bought them back in the day for $2,000 with a little blem in it. It doesn't bother me, but it's just how it is. So, if you want a PVS 14 right now, you want to get night vision, it's probably a good time. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, and we talked about this, and it will be brought up again, is the Kyber optic line. We talked about the red dot. I've got a video out on X, took it on a string, threw it in the ocean, and dunked it all the way to the bottom. You got to see some of the Sergeant Major fish swimming around and a puffer fish checking it out, and pulled it out, and it works fine. Post a photo of the optic. It's still going just strong. And that was probably in, I'm going to say 7 or 8 feet of water. I want to say he's got it rated for 7 feet for 30 minutes or whatever it is, but it is waterproof. So there is that. Without going into big detail on the last one, we talked about kind of what guns to buy. I mean, just like your starter kit and rigs and all that stuff. We're going to come back to that. And the reason why we kind of did that and we've rehashed this subject is because Brushbeater's coming out with more stuff. Now, this next time, what I've decided to do for the guys and myself is we're going to set up a purchase list. And what I hope to do is primarily purchase from Brushbeater because he's our boy. We want to take care of him, make sure he's doing all right. I know he's going to be fine. But we're also going to go shop around on Amazon and everything else because gear's important, training's more important, and it is very, very consequential for him to succeed, but it's also consequential for you guys to have at least the starting gear. That's why I brought up the night vision, because that came out today. He's closing that line out for something else, I believe, in the stuff, but they're phenomenal night vision, and I don't know what the deals are in the background, but I think they were going for like $1,900. They're going for $1,700 right now, so it's a good time to buy. It really, really is. And I think the discount on that just makes sense. AGM makes really good products. They do. The only thing that I would kind of give them crap about, I think their laser's a little bit too big, personally. And that's what it seems like. But I don't own their laser, and I've heard that from people. I'm not sure. But their lasers are pretty good too. So what I want to talk about tonight is a couple of things that kind of popped up on the radar, and I don't want to go into the stuff that we talked about because, to be fair, they made some really good points. I can't do it justice. I've listened to us talk, and trying to edit this stuff is killing me, and I'd rather just do it maybe in a live stream, and we'll get all the raws, ums, and ahs that I usually kick out, so we'll deal with that when it comes up. Let's go on to American Partisan. We here tend to try to stay out of the politics side of things, but I'm going to read the article that I kind of wrote up for this. I think with all the stuff that's been going on and a lot of the intel weenies out here and other stuff that you're going to run across in this field, that we run around in, the prior military guys, the preppers, and everything else, you see a lot of dumb crap. And after going to historians class, after talking to so many people, after dealing with this, it's very, very hard to break away from doing dumb stuff. And that's and understanding where stuff is. And I'm not the expert. This is why I'm the common man. This is why this podcast isn't experts talk about X, Y, Z, whatever. It's because we don't know everything. And sometimes we can find out stuff from the past. But let me start off with this. And this article is built out of us losing our discipline and some of our knowledge. And I've written articles where people make stupid mistakes and stuff like that too. But I'll let you go through this and see how you guys feel about this. Starting off, storage facility 87 miles away from the Enemy Tactical Operations Center, TOC, T-minus 8 days from initial transmission. I know it may not be possible, but I really don't want to burn alive, Houston said. Houston was an older gentleman with a receding hairline and sun-touched skin. A life of hard work had him hunched over a bit, and his hands showed the signs of a working man's life. You also make sure my kin are taken care of, he added as he looked at the fellow compatriots. All of them were dressed in working clothes of various brands, showing off grease stains and hard use like a badge of honor. They will absolutely be taken care of as long as we're alive and fighting, and I promise you, if I can help it, you won't feel even the faintest lick of flames. The gruff military-aged man in his 30s, with a long beard and shaggy hair, said in response. You know, you don't have to go through with this. You don't necessarily have to stay, he added. Yeah, I know, but I have a bone to pick with these guys, and knowing that I'm there and probably won't suffer any longer from this unyielding pain will be a blissful transition to heaven, Houston offered up as a gentle rebuttal to the out the man had given him. Besides, I won't be the one going to hell for committing suicide, and I'll be able to watch some monsters go where they belong. He tacked on, confirming his urge to seek justice and possibly a bit of vengeance. God only knows how I will be judged for these actions, but I want to make sure these bastards don't hurt anyone else, and I'm not ashamed to say the little sin of vengeance is mixed in with my thoughts as well, he finished. Smiling, the man nodded back to him as he handed the radio equipment in a small unmarked civilian bag, similar to that of a backpack for school, with a subdued gray color. I know you know how to operate radios, but let's go through this one more time and this setup, and then let's discuss a few locations since you know the area better than we do, the shaggy-haired man replied. For the next couple of hours, training, map reviewing, and planning continued as portions of his team were already in the process of hunting down signals and tracking them back to the sources clandestinely. Alliance of America Diversity, Security, and Unification Tactical Operations Center. T plus 20 minutes after initial transmission interception. Bree was a fierce, independent woman with a belly full of rage. Her anger was generations of oppression of minorities, and all the misgendering was about to conclude with the joy of shooting a bunch of white men who were trying to stop the needed change the U.S. had to go through. Bree had been open about her lifestyle since 2016, serving in the Space Force as a technology development expert. She was not stupid, and it took very little time for her engineering skills and knowledge to turn into a whole operation. Hell, she was an 06 before she was booted out, with Trump's orders over transgender prohibition signed into law by that bigoted asshole. It wouldn't fix the U.S. killing these bastards, but it was a fine step. She knew under her capable leadership she had built an amazing allyship that would defeat the modern Nazi holdouts. This was just another step towards a more inclusive and equitable world. Weeks early, Bree and her team, along with an intelligence branch, had engaged in some intelligence gathering in SIGINT to make the little project work. The enemy had been lazy, and were with her beautiful group of warriors and radio enthusiasts. They had set up many listening posts over the region. It had taken a few days, but patterns emerged, locations were identified, and then the big breakthrough came. Someone had obtained a copy of the enemy's trigram, which they hadn't changed even though the one-time pad being used was also unbreakable. The goal was to hunt the maggots down and ambush them before they had time to destroy their OTPs. Although the military did fracture over the transgender argument, Bree found support from people connected to the Socialist Rifle Association. This included a few Marines who trained up her crack hunting team. Contrary to the belief of most of the maggots, her community of progressive ideals had a lot of warriors who were skilled from GWAT to freedom fighters who operated in Ukraine and Syria. Several months earlier, they had captured a small reconnaissance team using radio direction finding techniques. They had easily identified the ground waves of the HF team and, using terrain analysis as well as some of possible target analysis, had set them up for success. Not only was the team operating HF, they had a security team on 2 meters, which had a radio that was intermittently transmitting. It took her team of warriors no time to hunt down the group right as they consolidated. The major break was the OTPs the team had on them that weren't burned. Sitting her talk in some rich person's mansion on a hill, she watched as her integrated team connected with a mesh network of frequency hopping spread spectrum technology, allowing her to remain constantly involved. Today had been especially amazing, with a low noise floor on the radio, meaning things came in crystal clear. Almost all the usual chatter had been quiet today as well, making things easier for the SIGINT team. This was likely due to it being a new holiday associated with the rebranding of the old United States into the new Democratic Social Alliance of America. Bree wasn't religious at all, but she thought that if there was a god, or maybe even a goddess, was guiding this whole operation, or maybe even a goddess was guiding the whole operation. The HF transmission was repeated 3 times in a row before a confirmation message was transmitted back. Then, more luck struck, as our enemy continued to send random signals on the 80-meter band. Most likely the radio had some issue and was dumping out random signals. Add to that, the operator was probably in one place, either waiting for a reply or maybe someone else with more information to send out. Bree just waited with bated breath, watching the team moving in on their prey and hoping they would at least capture the radio operator and possibly even more people. With a holiday going on and her team working throughout it, this would be such a morale boost for everyone involved. 65 miles west of AADSU TOC. T plus 46 minutes after initial transmission, Houston McCoy sat in his impromptu hide, waiting patiently for his Corps to arrive. Several months before, a small group of freedom fighters in the area had been destroyed by a regime that was trying to force Marxist ideals on people. Houston knew one of the men who had died trying to deliver information to the network of resistance fighters over HF. Unfortunately, the man wasn't very competent or skilled in the craft, even if he had meant well. Sure, Billy could run a radio like any other ham operator, but he didn't really understand how to hide properly. Houston told him to go to a class or two, like Historian's HF class or Wyoming Survival's course. Sadly, though, for years, the guy had not gone to classes and had spent more time on booze and buying firearms than he did actually learning anything, which had been a significant problem in general for the resistance. Now that things had gone to hell, people were clamoring to learn things clandestinely that they could have been training for years in the open safely. While Houston knew every loss hurt their cause, he also relied on the fact that some people sacrificed themselves by not being very skilled and would do anything to stop the atrocities going on, even if it got them killed. Mind you, no one remembered these people because they would die a fruitless death, even if it were a... All he knew was people would remember what he was about to do, and that his sacrifice wasn't going to be in some useless manner strung up and tortured for information, or outright executed in public on a stage for others to see. He found it very sickly hypocritical that the same group of people who had been screaming about detention facilities being concentration camps during the Trump administration were now sending people to re-education camps, not to mention actually killing people. This time, however, he was going to do something that he never thought he would do until he was diagnosed with cancer. For his whole life, he had known something like this would need someone with a steel conviction to pull off something amazing. Up until his cancer diagnosis, Houston didn't think he would have been willing to be such a person. But with the clarity of terminal illness, he saw the path God had laid out for him. His family was safe, with his friends, and he had said his goodbyes. But his last act on this planet wasn't going to be dying in a bed with no air condition, or even worse, in some camp. After teaching his replacement everything he knew, he and a few buddies had hatched an interesting plan to get some retaliation on the menace that was soon to spread out into his community. Up the tree was an 80-meter antenna with his little QRPP transmitter attached. He was randomly making noise over the airways as if his radio had an issue. All the while he was watching with a pair of cheap binoculars and drinking from a flask filled with Diplomatico. He'd been stone cold sober until his transmission started, and he knew if he had done things correctly, it wouldn't matter if he was sober or not for the rest of this. So he's going to make damn sure no one went home with even a partial flask as he sat there for what seemed like an eternity until he heard the sounds of crunching leaves. The embankment he was on against precluded anyone from really sneaking up on him, and the flat terrain ahead of him gave him not only a good vantage point, but also excellent propagation of signal. He picked up his binoculars again and was scanning as he caught sight of movement. He quietly waited as a small force moved through the sparse woods, one individually randomly holding up a device and pivoting ever so slowly. He felt like it took those people forever to find his hideout, but when they did, shouting and firearms were pointed at him, which didn't scare him anymore. He knew that with all his sins forgiven in the past, and deep in his heart he knew who had sacrificed for those sins. Even now, the minor sin of vengeance was going to be forgiven because of Jesus. God knew that Houston was never going to be a perfect man, but God also knew precisely what was in his heart. Houston had more than a desire for vengeance. He truly wanted to stop these monsters in any way he could, and Houston was exhausted from the large amount of pain and lack of medication available nowadays. Forcefully, the small team rolled Houston onto his belly and zip-tied his arms as they rummaged through his meager kit, confiscating his intentionally broken pistol as they started to take photos of everything around them. The small team moved out and looked for anyone else, but did not find any signs of other individuals. T plus 49 minutes 30 seconds after initial transmission interception. Back at the talk, Bree smiled as the hunters had not only acquired another copy of the trigram, but they also had gotten a few OTPs in the field. With all the juicy intel, not only was the field team decrypting and preparing to bring back an actual live insurgent, but they had also used the fancy technology Bree had set up to transmit photos back to the TOC. The man in custody was so stupid that he hadn't even taken the time to destroy the OTPs he used. Within moments, they had gone through the trigram and were decoding and decrypting the message. She thought about going into the decryption section and watching as the code broke, but she knew it was best to give them the victory of breaking the code and bringing it to her in her beautiful office. It was late in the day, and the sun beamed into the office, bathing the large desk made for a millionaire. Bree felt it suited her and her team's victory if she was surrounded by a bright sunlight, washing away the evil of the nation's past. Whenever she had to wait for something, she could just sit and marvel at the beauty behind her, overlooking the rolling hills. Add to that the blazing ball of fire shining through and warming the cool building, and the grand office full of war trophies made Bree feel even more in command of her world. She figured with a few more operations like this, she could move up to bigger and even more suitable jobs in the new administration. One of her newly minted lieutenants who loved puzzles burst into the office with a startled look on their face. They'd been working in the decryption section that they had set up and were responsible for a significant portion of the new computer software, which provided them with easy access to SIGINT and data. Bree was very proud of Xandra's skills, but they never had barged into her office like this before. General, I don't think something's right here, Xandra offered as a reply to Bree's confused and almost angered look. What do you mean? Bree replied, waving her to a chair. But Xandra came straight up and put a note on the table. This is what I decoded, but it isn't operational in nature. Placing a printed sheet with the unencrypted transmission down, I even verified this with the signal intercept we got, and all three messages were the same, Xandra finished. Puzzled now, Bree pulled the sheet to her and began to read the paper. If she had balls anymore, they would have shrunk up into her body in fear. Go warn the hunter team to leave that place right now, she ordered as she stood up. Lying on the table, the message simply read, F-U-U-F-A-K-E-D-I-K-E WITHNODICKCANCERISKINBUTIGET numeral 2 KUXX. 65 miles west. T plus 5645 after initial transmission interception. A text on the mesh network buzzed, and the RTO looked at his small screen, then up at his sergeant. One of the former Marines had stopped another one of the hunters from kicking the old man on the ground, reassuring both the hunter and this Houston guy that punishment would be doled out back at the compound after questions were answered. The Marine sergeant continued to supervise the collection of all the information and evidence. Confused with the message that had come over the mesh network, the young RTO walked over to the sergeant and cleared his throat. Nervously, he watched as the sergeant turned his head towards him. Sergeant, I don't know what this is all about, but do you know anyone who would be sending us Bible verses? The RTO said with a confused expression on his face. I thought basically everybody was an atheist at this point. Handing the little mesh networked device over to the sergeant, he stood there watching as the sergeant read aloud. Luke 23-42. But the other criminal protested. Don't you fear God even when you have been sentenced to die? We deserve to die for our crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. The sergeant spoke out loud, with a perplexed look on his face. I don't think anyone would have been involved with this that believed this bullshit, he said, just as he heard Houston say something face down nearby. What did you say, you piece of shit? The older Marine sergeant said in his DI voice, chuckling as his breath forced dust in little pillow puffs away from his face. Houston rolled his head towards the two. I said, Sergeant, that I hope you repented because I know where I'm going. The only place you're fucking going is a small cell until I'm done getting all the information I want out of you, the Marine replied, just as Houston's head exploded into a pink mist. The crack of the supersonic round bouncing around the sparse trees, reverberating as bits of bone and brain splattered on the RTO and sergeant. The two didn't have any time to process the Jackson Pollock horror show the round made of them. As everyone crouched from the shot, the RTO and sergeant only had moments of confusion as it dawned on them their prisoner had just been shot, confusing them even more. But as both of them realized something was extremely wrong with the situation, with the fading sun dimming on the horizon, the bright light of both realization and fire erupted around the hunters. The odd smell of petroleum, the sickening heat of the unnatural fire, scratched their skin as they hit the deck and looked for any place of refuge from the inferno they had been placed in. The fiery trap Houston and his friends laid out engulfed the area in a hellscape. The only shots that rang out were wounding shots, crippling the hunter team just enough to prevent escape by leaving them in a temporary fiery pit of hell until they were judged and went on to a more severe punishment. 65 miles from ADSU-TOC. Team plus 57 after initial transmission intercept. It should actually say ADSU-TOC. And then the T plus 57 minutes after initial transmission intercept. That was an error on my editing. Bria, the same Lieutenant Xander, rush in again, saying that they could not get a hold of the hunters, as if most of the mesh network had just gone down spontaneously. They both stood on the side of the desk facing Bree's monitor looking at the signal's intelligence information. They both were trying to make sense of the original message and now down network reviewing that day's SIGINT data. With neither one of them looking at a large window facing the sunset behind them, the only thing that warned them something was wrong was the crash of windows they could hear throughout the building. As windows randomly broke in the building, the final one came from behind them. With a crash, neither had the time to turn as a burst of fiery, explosive overpressure struck the two against the wall, spontaneously igniting all the papers and plastics in the room. Starvis, don't use compromised or possibly compromised encryption software. This comes from where I started talking about the ATAC and the CivTAC. There's, in the article, we kind of discuss a little bit about this and why so many of us are not okay with ATAC and CivTAC. The reason why is, yes, it was made by the U.S. government. Yes, it was made for the U.S. Air Force. And you'll notice a lot of special forces don't touch it, but it's being pushed very hard online, especially YouTube, and by certain, how do you say, civilian entities making radios now. And it's disturbing because people get a secure feeling with anything, and they make stupid errors. One of the things that I posted says JD Vance, Pete say, if you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again. And then JD Vance's reply, let's just make sure our message is tight here. And if there are things we can do up front to minimize risk to Saudi oil facilities, we should do it. That was one of the leaks from the United States government on Signal. And this also pushes on to Signal and all this other stuff. If you are chatting on a group, I don't care if it's Discord, which is constantly regulated and checked on, to Signal, to whatever, do not talk about anything stupid. There's a shooter, an Asian shooter on YouTube, and he says, don't be a dumbass. And I think this is very, very appropriate. I go into some of the other stuff on here that talks about Signal and how Signal's set up and a few other little cheesy things. I make the point that I don't think the U.S. or the Air Force might do anything with ATAC against American citizens, but it doesn't mean other countries haven't compromised that stuff. And we know how good places like Mossad and stuff like that are. So if there's a backdoor into the software, it's probably going to be U.S. made. But that doesn't mean a foreign entity hasn't gotten a hold of it. One of the things in World War II that you have to realize, field intelligence generally didn't gather as much information. That's the spy network and all that stuff. Didn't really gather information. What they did is confirm information from signals intelligence. And that's where a lot of stuff got done. That's where you hear Ultra and I believe the Japanese were the Purple Code or something like that. And straight up on that, we also had the Germans who thought they were unbreakable because they were freaking idiots and egotistical. And that, honestly, that's why the Japanese and the Germans got screwed over so hard. If you want to know a lot more into it, I would highly recommend Scout's book on signals intelligence. I don't think I bring it up enough, and I might read it eventually, but that's a very good book for you to understand how signals can break. And here's the other thing. This is why I brought up ATAC. ATAC and mesh networks talk all the fucking time. So in this story, when you were reading it, or when I read it to you, they talk about the group going out. Well, they set up to go out there and find the mesh networks, find the nodes, intercept the nodes. If you can do a man-in-the-middle attack on those, you can get information and or even sometimes, if they're not set up right, open up all their messages and send messages. That's one of the problems with this stuff is the technology is getting there. But even with like the AES 256 encryption and stuff like that, sometimes having a node is more dangerous. And because these things are short range generally, you're going to have nodes. And you can't put security on everything because at that point you use normal radios, which encrypted radio is going to work way better in that sense. So I don't want to mitigate people from looking into this stuff, but I don't want it to be your first line of defense. Your first line of defense should be good handling of radios. And this comes from the Gorilla's Guide to the Baofeng radio. You can see that. And he's actually got it linked, I believe. Let's see what he linked to. Yep. He's got all his books linked on Brush for Your Store in a hyperlink. And the first one is the Gorilla's Guide to Baofeng radio in field version. It's on sale right now for 20 fucking bucks. Spiral Top. Go buy that damn thing. There's also the Gorilla's Dispatch and a few other books in there that are interesting to say the least. So if you already got that or you want something else, go look around. But one of the things I did above in the story was Breen Zanders should have realized something was off about the whole thing, especially with a message being repeated over and over. That said, hubris and multiple people working on the same task sometimes prevent the forest from being seen through the trees, so to speak. The phenomenon occurred both sides during World War II and wasn't exclusively to the British or German experience. And it's very true. The Brits were as hubris when it came to coding and everything else, and they made some awful mistakes, even though people like Leo Marx stated that they signaled that there was an issue and they were not listened to initially. As I get older, I realize a lot of those books that were written by specific people might be a little braggadocio, and I'm not sure how Marx is. I don't know. I forget the guy's name for London Calling the North Pole. I don't know how much bragging he did either. But in the end, he wasn't lying that they didn't catch the signals and people weren't paying attention and then they caught the signals. Now, I kind of tend to lean on Marx knew something was wrong because, first of all, this is something we're talking about on the advanced course is for the HF is possibly having you guys do a OTP in a classroom as fast as you can and see how many errors you get. And that's something I recommend you do anyways. How fast can you write an OTP? How fast can you decode an OTP if you're going to be the RTO? It's something important. It's work that you should be doing. Everybody should know how to do OTPs in the first place. And if you have an ADL-1, Partisan Labs makes them. Update your software. If you had it a while, if you got a new one, you're totally good. It's not that big of a deal. There was some very key settings, like if you printed out an OTP every so many seconds on like a certain point, you could have the randomness go away to an extent. Not completely, but a couple numbers would populate more than others. And they're like, this needs to be fixed. It was found, it was fixed. So if you want to reprint your OTPs, you can. But reality is, even if they had this little error, over time they might be able to figure out something. But if you've got a trigram on top of it, it's going to be very hard. And if you're changing both of them in a pace plan, in a time frame of usage, you should be pretty okay. And the reason why I bring that up too is I do kind of touch base on some things in here. I believe if it wasn't this article, it was the article before that I talked about Dryad. Nope, this is definitely this article. So if I scroll down, you'll see it. There's some Dryad and Batco encryption, and that's 1980s to 2010, and that talks about how paper encryption just surface level, and why we got away from that, and why OTPs are still in existence is because they're basically unbreakable unless you have one. And before you go into it, yeah, quantum computers and everything else, the problem with that is a quantum computer without any other information get your random encoded message, it is going to be nearly impossible for it to decode it, because in that code, it could be anything. So you got 250 character code, anything that fits in 250 characters, it's going to print out. From a Bible verse to a ingredient list, you name it. Now, over time, maybe quantum computers can figure something out, but we'll see. And realistically, nobody's coming after you for that at the moment. But it's something to think about is all this stuff, what we did, how we went from Batco and Dryad was the American side. And we were running those for authorization and saying, hey, here's a grid coordinates using this thing, and changing them every 6 hours because that's how long they lasted. And God only knows how many messages you could send before somebody can figure it out. But the thing you learn from World War II is a lot of the messages we broke, and as great as Bletchley Park was, and as great as Turing was, And these things, I think they call them bombas or bombs, which is basically a decryption machine they made to figure out Enigma. This stuff, most of the time, got decrypted and was useful after that. And that's kind of what you may need to do. So if you're a POW or anything like that, or if you've studied any of the POW stuff, done SEER school, everybody realizes under duress, you are going to eventually crack and tell your secrets. The principal job for you is to not crack before the information you release doesn't matter. So let's say I have a PACE plan, and that PACE plan is good for 24 hours, and I've memorized that one, and I destroyed all the other information. They can torture me for 23.95 hours, and then if I crack then, they have almost no time to do anything with it. That's the whole point. And this is something you, even with an OTP, which is what you should be using, and using Sarnex for authentication and other authentication techniques that do exist that I'm not going to go into on a podcast. Make sure you can tell if your team is okay. Make sure the authentication works. Make sure that you destroy your stuff. And I posted a video on this, and we reviewed it in class on in the HF class. We kind of talked about destroying your stuff. Make sure whatever you've got all your OTPs written down on, you can get rid of and quickly. The OTP is printed out on a thermal paper. It takes nothing to heat that up and destroy that information. You can print it out on paper that's water soluble, which is my preferred method personally. There's 1,001 ways, flash paper, you name it, burn bags. But whatever you do, make sure you keep a hold of it. Side note on the OTP, and I think that's reviewed in the book. We haven't gotten there in the book, and it's been a while since I've read all the way through it again. OTPs are only as good as the transmitting and receiving people have secured their OTPs. So if I have one and you, dear listener, have one, as long as a third party hasn't gotten a hold of that, our message is unbreakable. The moment it is grabbed or copied or whatever else, or they grab me and my OTP I haven't destroyed, they can transmit whatever they want. So that's also part of the reason why, like OTPs, if you send a team out, send them out with a handful of OTPs for the duration of whatever operation. Maybe it's just a reconnaissance and you want to make sure they have enough for reconnaissance. But those OTPs go to that individual team and no other team. Do not use universal OTPs, because every time, once you use it one time, it should be destroyed. If you reuse it and they figure it out, they can start to decrypt that information. Now, you may still use a trigram to obfuscate their message, and you're converting the numbers into letters and all this other stuff. The reality is, if you don't do it right, you're gonna fuck yourself. So anyways, I've been rambling long enough. It's almost time for me to get off here, and I'm probably going to do some editing. I'm sorry to Patriot Man and everybody else. I'm going to do one of these gun shows because we love talking about firearms. Wisco loves his firearms, and he is a great dude to talk to, and I love the diversity of how we talk to people. Not the inclusivity. We're not although we will include you if you really want to come up and chat on a podcast sometime. Hit me up. I had one horse farm that I absolutely love, an HP, that came on and talked about that stuff. And yes, I say it every time. We are going to get them on eventually. I talked to a historian today. I might have him on sooner or later when I can figure out how Scout did. I'm going to ask Scout first. Be like, hey, how did you do this? Because I want to talk to him too. And we're going over stuff for an advanced HF class. So there'll be the HF class for you guys who have general license or have been through RTO course. It's worth you going to. That's coming up in November. I posted on my stuff, and I'll tell you right now when it's going to be. It's going to be the 14th through the 16th of November. There may be an advanced one, class 2. I don't want to leave any of this stuff out, so I'll kind of go over this. 1st through 3rd of August, North Carolina is going to be the radio telephone operator course. It's a 3-day course. Scout course is 24th to 26th, and 27th to 29th is the recce course, so they run concurrently. Fighting carbine is 6th to 7th of September in North Carolina. Tactical Combat Casualty Care is 20th to 21st in North Carolina. I really want to go to that, but I'm going to be on the road doing wedding stuff. Advanced Radio Telephone Operation course is going to be 4th to 6th August in North Carolina, and that is concurrent with the first RTO course. So if you want to take RTO and then Advanced RTO, you can. And then the Signals Intelligence course is going to be the 12th to the 14th of September. So there you go. That's what's coming down the pipeline for Brush Beater. Man, oh man, did I mess up on my timing. So this is supposed to be out Tuesday, Wednesday. It definitely was not. And I really should have sat down and popped open Joe Dolio's website. And there's a little section saying, hey, I'm going to do that next time. And I missed a group get together with my brothers tonight because of work requirements and getting home late. So I felt like I needed to pop in and actually talk about Joe's stuff. One of the biggest problems and one of the reasons why I started this podcast, not just to have fun and talk to you guys and chit chat about things and have responses on X. I'm not here for popularity. I just want you guys to hear things and be able to think about stuff and make your own decisions. But it's really freaking hard to figure out what courses out there are worth it and what aren't. And that's hopefully over time as more good, competent instructors come out and we find these instructors and people go, I can interview people who are going to these classes and be like, hey, is this good or not? So I wanted to do a shout out to Joe's Camp Ponderosa, and he's got a whole bunch of stuff coming up. This weekend is going to be the 18th or 20th, if this comes out in time, is going to Fieldcraft course. What also is going on July 25th is going to be a first aid one-day class with Project 223 Preparedness. If you haven't listened to his podcast, he's actually a pretty good narrator, and he explains political stuff. It's kind of why we try to stay out of it, but the more I read, the more I'm into it, the harder it is for me not to say things, and trying to keep it low scoped and keep it to the stuff, the courses, the training, and this stuff tends to be hard for me. But Project 223, phenomenal good. His class is $100. If you don't think it's worth going out there for a day and learning something for $100, I don't know what to tell you. August 1st to the 3rd, Community Security Operations. August 9th is one that I'm really interested to know more about. It's called Getting Home. And I think that's partly because so many of my friends travel for work. And in the last podcast that got shit canned again, we were talking about that. Liquid Rabbit's now doing a traveling work job, and he's gone a lot. Wisco Mando's traveling a lot. I traveled a lot. There's a couple other guys that I know who are in the Arkansas, Missouri group that we talked about on the podcast a little bit, and that didn't work out because of technical difficulties, and they travel all the time too. And the gear, the requirements, the needs, what do you take, how do you do it, it's an extraordinarily difficult thing. And I know Joe travels, I know Scout travels, and they travel fairly light, but they also have that network of people if something goes wrong that they can go rely on, which is hard. He's got an August 10th Baofeng Basics class. I believe that's $100 too. August 15th and 17th is going to be an FTX, which is a short range patrol up there. That really sounds interesting and fun, and I bet that's close to the concept of what Scout does with the Scout course and Recce course. I'd have to talk to him about that. August 22nd and 24th, another Fieldcraft. August 25th to 27th, Community Service Operations. August 29th to 31st, Combatives Weekend. I know he teaches hand-to-hand combat, and maybe there's some bayonet training in there. I don't know. September 6th, Getting Home again. September 7th, Baofeng again. September 13th and 14th, Mountain Survival. And September 19th to 21st, Fieldcraft. September 26th to 28th is Community Security Operations. And then October 21st to 23rd is Fieldcraft, and that one's going to be at Brush Beater Training Center in North Carolina. I want you to just heads up, like most of his courses are about $400. There's a couple of Fieldcraft courses, $500. The Community Security Operations, $500. But getting home courses, $200. Baofeng Basics is $100. He's not screwing anyone over. I know the guy knows his stuff. He's a very, very smart dude. And you can tell when you talk to him how intelligent he is. He's not a braggart. He's not somebody who blows things out of proportion. But he's quick to correct too. And I think he's smart enough to be able to do that in a good way. Sometimes he doesn't correct all the time as abruptly as probably needs to. But he's such a solid guy. I can't not post him. I'm gonna probably talk about another guy soon, but I want to talk to him first and find out about his courses and if he wants our community out there. I think he does, because he's a friend of Scouts and he works with a organization that trains some really cool classes, but I can't tell if those classes are military or not. And it's one of those like, contact us to have a course for your team, which way too much money and time for my likings, unfortunately. I'd love to go to all those courses. I just don't have the ability to. But I kind of cleaned up the back end of this, and hopefully there'll be a nice little ending. But if there isn't, I just always want to say, keep your shovel sharp. Don't be a loot drop. Be smart with your money. Things have gotten hairier every week, every month, and it's gotten to the point that the absurd is turning into the regular. And I'm not saying panic and go buy a whole bunch of stuff and do all this crazy stuff, but be frugal, be smart, and think about how to prepare your family. And maybe it's just start praying about it and get your mind right, and then figure out what to do instead of just doing an absurd purchasing order. But anyways, hope you guys had a good time. Appreciate you listening to us. I swear next time I will have more people than just my idiot self reading to you and communicating. Thanks, and you guys have a great time. Bye.